Mike, if I was going to do a tier list of just football channels on YouTube, I think we'd be on the must cop section. No doubt about it. We on the must like, must comment, must subscribe. Just saying. But we back, Mic'd Up Football. How you doing, Mike?
I'm doing all right. I mean, I wanted to just keep it the standard, the elite, great, good, as everybody else does. But then you come in here with all these rhyming tiers, and I guess we're doing 5 tiers today for all the people. For fantasy football only, we're doing must cop, almost top, decent bop, just stop, please drop.
No doubt about it. Come on. How can you not tell what these tiers are about? Come on. Like they get right to it. But we could start with we can go tier by tier, kind of like how we feel about each tier and change it to the actual name. But just so you know, when I put someone in the elite section, I'm going to say they're in the must cop section. But so let's start with obviously elite must cop.
Elite must cop. All right, bet. Next up, you want to go great?
Wait, great it is.
Great it is. And then average or good? How do you want to say that?
I'd say good because we did great. I'll go good, and then we below. Would you say below average? How do you
I'll,
want
s-
it?
I say we do this one as average, and I say we do the last one as we could just keep it please drop because that'll be below average. If you're
There
if
we
you
go.
if you have somebody on your fantasy team that is below average in terms of fantasy football, just drop them because it's a waiver wire weekly pickup. You know what I mean? So I say we just hop right in. You said before we came on that you wanted to alternate this, so the first person is going to put the guy, and then we're just going to debate him from there. So, Mike, do you want to start off with Josh Allen?
Let's start it off.
All right.
Last year, he was a top 8 quarterback. I don't think with the addition of Stephon Diggs, I can't imagine we see Josh Allen take a step back in fantasy. Hopefully, that offensive line, as we did in our team recap video, it's young. Hopefully, they kind of get some experience, grow a little bit. Josh Allen hopefully grows a lot, and hopefully Stephon Diggs helps that. So I'm going to keep him in the great. I think that's where he belongs.
I think that might be a little bit of a stretch, but great's all right. I see what you're saying because you have the rushing upside. You have again, you had a guy who was thrown to John Brown and Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox last year as his top targets. Now you add to me, in my top 100 list, the number 8 receiver in the entire NFL right now. I can understand it, so I'm cool with that. Next up, Tom Brady. This one's probably gonna be a little bit controversial. If you've watched any of me talking about Brady, I might not be the biggest fan right now. I'm going to put him in good, Mike. Last year the whole thing with Chris Godwin getting open, for example, was you have Mike Evans, the prospect of him going deep, and then Godwin's going to be underneath against these cornerback 2s and 3s. Well, what's stopping me from, if I'm a defensive coordinator, putting a cornerback 2 on Mike Evans, bracketing him with a safety, making it so Tom Brady's not going to throw that deep ball, and then taking my number 1 corner on Godwin underneath and kind of taking your 2 best weapons away, and now you have to throw to a 75-year-old Gronk. I just think that people don't realize that with the quarterback change, there's going to be changes in game plan as well. You know what I mean? So if you were just saying, yeah, defense is going to play Tom Brady like they played Jameis, yeah, maybe, but I don't think they are. That's why I have him as good.
Yeah, for sure. To be honest, I agree with you. I think he's on the upper echelon of good. I think once this list is all said and done, but I think he's good. I think my problem with what you said is you just showed how a defense is going to stop 3 weapons. How many defenses really stop 3 options, 3 weapons? I don't see too many of them. Maybe elite defenses, but not at a consistent rate. And obviously, also that offensive line. I guess he already came from an elite offensive line with the Patriots, but I think the Bucs offensive line with that weapons, we haven't seen a combo like that necessarily in a long time with Tom Brady. And obviously, he's hitting the 40 mark. He is in the 40 mark. How much really does he have left in the tank? I think it's an honest question. And I think also his arm strength. Obviously, Mike Evans is best if you get him to the ball, down the field. Can Tom Brady even get the ball downfield to Mike Evans? So your best weapon, can Tom Brady even utilize it to its best attributes? I'm not sure. So I'm with you with the good. I think, we could see a really solid starter here. I think he could end up in that top 10 rank. I'm not sure I'd bank on it, but I think good is perfect for him right there.
Well, here's the thing too. If you're talking about just in terms of value, this isn't value, right? So if you're taking Tom Brady at quarterback 3, then that's a below average selection. But if you're getting him at QB 8 or 9, I don't think you can hate on it. And that's where to me he really gets into the good to great discussion because no, I wouldn't stretch for Tom Brady like I fear a lot of people will, but I don't have a problem with him just considering those weapons like you said.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think also you brought up a good point. The value of these players is all really dependent on where you get them in your draft. I think that's going to be a huge thing. Kind of like how we talk about the draft. every player has potential. I won't say every player, but most players have potential. Like first, some second round picks probably should have been picked in the first, and then vice versa. It just mattered where you get them for the value at that pick. So just as you were mentioning with quarterback 8-9, not quarterback 3 there. But we can get on to the next one, and I think I got Drew Brees. I think this is actually a tough one. I honestly do. I think he falls right between the elite and great. I think the elite quarterbacks in fantasy, they have that rushing attack, and obviously Drew Brees does not have that, but he has elite weapons and plenty of them. It's a tough one for me. Um, will this be the year? I think the Saints are going to be on a run. I think this is really going to try to be the going out party for Drew Brees. I'm going to say elite this year.
This is an interesting one because in the top 100 series that I've been doing, I always say like I'm not predicting or projecting regression when we haven't seen it. Well, with Brees, honestly, if I was projecting regression, he might be. He's a leading candidate. If I'm not going to lie, we've seen his play kind of slip late in the seasons and into the postseason these last couple of years. Obviously, now you do add Emmanuel Sanders, who he's really the first number 2 receiver Brees has had since 2016 when they drafted Michael Thomas with Brandon Cooks. So I can see elite, but I don't know if that's the kind of quarterback that I want leading me into like a playoff run as my number 1 fantasy quarterback. That's the only hesitancy I have because we have seen him start to fall off a little bit late in the seasons as of late, if that makes sense. But I'm cool with him in elite as long as you're still on it.
So, honestly, I got him like the quarterback 4 or 5 position. That's probably where I'm putting him at. We'll get through the list. I don't think 6, but 4 or 5 is probably where I'm putting him at. Would you have that as elite? I think if top 4 is elite, top 5 is great. That's where he's right on that border for me. That's kind of how I'm looking at this.
I got you. And at the end, I know a lot of people do this. At the end, we'll make sure we look and see if there's any discrepancies, maybe move some people around. But I don't expect there will be many because like this next guy, for example, Jacoby Brissett, he's a please drop. He's a please drop. I don't think there's any discussion that needs to be said there. Mike, you ready to get into Teddy Bridgewater?
Well, but real quick, I just want to mention, not just please drop him from your fantasy team. Please drop him just from the team in general. Just cut him, man. Obviously, you have no interest in him. No one really has interest in him. Let him be a quality backup quarterback somewhere else. So just please drop him.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think he has a role in this league as like in Miami, for example. I think that he could play as like a Ryan Fitzpatrick during a redshirt year for a guy like Tua. I don't have a problem with him in that role, especially on his salary. I believe it was last year he was making like $15 million a year. I think this year it's up to 20 something. So I don't necessarily love that. But if you can get him in that mid-tier, mid-teens salary, I don't hate him as just like a transitional quarterback. But for fantasy purposes, please drop.
No doubt. But for the price that the Colts are paying him, that's not for a backup quarterback. No go. But we can go on to the next one because I think that's about all we have to say. This will be all you. Teddy Bridgewater out in Carolina.
Oh, I wasn't Brissett. All right, I'll take Bridgewater then. I'm going to say average. I think he's the epitome of average, actually. I know we saw him play very well in New Orleans over that 5-game stretch. But, again, you got to consider the weapons that he had, the offensive line he had, the running game he had, Michael Thomas. Does he have that in Carolina? A little bit. He has Christian McCaffrey, DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel, Robbie Anderson, a nice allotment of weapons. But to me, the problem is the offensive line. The Saints' 4th best offensive lineman last year, Larry Warford, he might be the number 1 guy on the Panthers now. That's, to me, the real problem with that team. And that's why, to me, his ceiling, I don't want to say ceiling, but to me, he's just an average fantasy quarterback. If you have him as your QB2, that's fine. Or if you need to start him on a 1 week, when your quarterback's on bye or in case there's an injury, there's no problem. But you shouldn't be drafting Teddy Bridgewater, in my eyes.
Yeah, no doubt. He should be a waiver wire pickup. Maybe if you get a good matchup, you kind of see the potential there. That's about as far as on a bye week. That's where I'd have Teddy Bridgewater. So I think me and you are right there with where Teddy Bridgewater is at.
You ready to go into Burrow? You got Burrow this time?
Oh, I got Burrow. So Bengals fans are going to hate me, but I think he has some elite. Not AJ Green was elite. Mixon is on the top tier of running backs. Tyler Boyd is probably top 5, top 10 wide receiver number 2. But I'm going to put
T. Higgins, John Ross. You got Jonah Williams coming back.
I think he'll be on the upper echelon of average, just stop. I think that's where he's at. I think the offensive line is questionable to say. I think that questionable might be an understatement, to be honest with you. And you don't see too many rookie quarterbacks performing with an offensive line like that. I think the weapons are there. I think he could be maybe on the upper echelon. He could even be in that good tier. I think he could not like actually just if you're drafting, no. But if maybe kind of the first couple weeks in the waiver wire, maybe you start seeing something, you could pick him up as your quarterback number two. But he probably won't be anything more than your quarterback number two. Maybe play him on someone's bye week, and that's about the best you got.
No, I agree. I actually thought you were going to go a little bit lower than that. That's why you had me scared, and I was citing those Cincy weapons. To me, if it's a dynasty league, though, maybe there's some potential there. Maybe you could put them up a tier, 2 tiers, as long as you think that Cincinnati is going to be able to address that offensive line. But no, I do agree with you. I think that you're going to have people who reach for him just because it was that number 1 pick that we saw, play so well at LSU. But in the grand scheme of things, in terms of fantasy football, I don't love it. The only thing I do like is he will be playing from behind quite a bit, you assume, with that defense. So maybe the game script is going to favor him. But I do agree, for right now, until we really see him do something, I can't put him higher than average,
Yeah, something I just want to mention just on this video, probably should have mentioned in the beginning, 4 points for a passing touchdown, not 6. Because I think if it was 6, and that might be maybe some people are confused about the Drew Brees. If it was 6 points per passing touchdown, it'd probably be a harder argument to get him out of that elite position. But 4 points per pass, just so we can get that out of the way.
Yeah. No, that's a good point because again, people are probably saying Josh Allen. What's up with that? Well, again, 6 points per rushing touchdown, obviously 4 points per passing. Like I think that you can get it there. Derek Carr, that's a really interesting one. I'm not gonna lie. I think that with him, I'm gonna put him in the low end of good, and that might be a little bit surprising to people. But I really do think that Henry Ruggs, in a way, even though they draft him a little bit early to me, I think that he kind of unlocks this offense in a way that he does something that nobody on that team does. Now you have Tyrell Williams, who's that big body guy, can catch these contested balls. You have Hunter Renfrow working underneath, and he's a reliable target. Now you have Henry Ruggs, who can take the top off the defense, mixed with Darren Waller up the seams. I don't hate it. Obviously, the question is how much is Josh Jacobs going to kind of hurt his value, I guess, because Jacobs last year we saw multiple games over 20, 25 carries. So how much is that going to hurt Carr? I don't really know if it does. I think that the Raiders are going to be a team who, again, they're going to be playing from behind a decent bit, and I think that Carr can capitalize with the wide receiver core that just does a wide variety of things, if that makes sense. That's why I would have him at the lower end of good and just above guys like Teddy Bridgewater because I didn't even mention the offensive line either. That's probably a top 5 offensive line in the league. That's why I have him at low end good.
Yeah, so I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think you're outlandish. I think we're probably in the same spot. He's better than Burrow. I don't think he's at Brady level. And I think just some of the quarterbacks to see coming up, I don't think he's better than some of those individuals. So I think he's kind of on that. He's one of those quarterbacks that's on the kind of the box of good to average. Well, I'd probably have him on average now and see what our list looks like. He's kind of the player I'd almost like to do last and see what we have because I think he's going to fall right on the line of good and average. He will be the border, I believe. But I totally understand good. If that's your quarterback number 2, I think you're in a really good spot. I think if you on your quarterback number 2, I think that's the kind of guy you want to have. So top tier quarterback 2, I think still probably in the good spot.
And even last season, when he didn't have a guy like Henry Ruggs, he was QB 17 overall in fantasy scoring. So again, if you're in a 10 to 12 man league, I don't think you can really hate that. But kind of going back to you, Mike, where do you have Kirk Cousins at?
So you lose Stephon Diggs. I don't think the Vikings. Obviously, you got Justin Jefferson. Is that going to be immediate replacement? Probably not. He's not going to replace obviously your number 8 wide receiver in your top 100 list. Probably pretty similar on mine. I'm going to go average. I'm going to go average. I just don't feel the Vikings this year. I think they're in a tough division. Well, not really, but they have some defense. They got to play the Packers. I think the Lions' defense has improved. I know you probably disagree with the loss of Darius Slay, but you get a number 2 corner like Desmond Trufant. You get Okudah, Hand. The Bears' defense always a problem, even if it has lost some pieces. But I just don't like the Vikings' offense. Like, how much are you going to rely on Dalvin Cook? Dalvin Cook wants an extension. Isn't even going to play this year. If Dalvin Cook doesn't play this year, then you're not going to be seeing probably the 8 in the box you were last season when Dalvin Cook was even playing. I think there's just a lot of problems with the Vikings this year. I don't trust them. I don't trust the Vikings.
No, it's tough for me because if we were making just a quarterback tier list, which maybe we'll do in the future, if you guys do want that, let us know. But again, for straight fantasy purposes, it's tough because I would say that Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback than Derek Carr. But again, when it comes to the situation that he's in for fantasy next year, losing Diggs is a big blow. And having a Dalvin Cook that we don't even know if he's going to play. If he doesn't play, I certainly think that he's in this average tier. I think if Dalvin does play, you can put him either right before or after a guy like Derek Carr. Last year, he was actually just under Carr, QB 18 in that season. But again, he only had Diggs for the vast majority. Thielen, he only had 10 regular season targets after week 6. So, now you're getting Thielen. You're going to add Justin Jefferson in, who is an interesting piece. But other than that, I just don't see the weapons on that offense. I think that if anything, they're going to rely on Dalvin Cook. And if Dalvin Cook doesn't play, now you're definitely going to see a very average Kirk Cousins. So even though initially I was kind of hesitant, I don't think that you're necessarily wrong at all. In terms of the next one.
Oh, I think this one's interesting, man. And I think it's interesting you got this. Where are you going to put Dak Prescott?
Well, as people may or may not know, I'm not the biggest Dak fan necessarily because I think he just gets too much credit for what he's done in that situation. Again, I always say your talents or your performance is indicative of an interaction between your talents and your situation. And, Dak's had the perfect situation, but for fantasy, the perfect situation is almost great. So I'm going to put him just above Josh Allen. I think that he's right there. To me, if you're throwing to CD, Amari, Michael Gallup behind a great offensive line, I think that Dak might be an MVP candidate next year. And is that because of anything that he would do better than some of these guys below him? Not necessarily, but for fantasy purposes, I'll take Dak probably as a top 6 QB, straight up. It's not what you expected, but
see, this is my problem. I got Breeze and Elite. I'd take Prescott over Breeze. I think any day of the week. I think the talent is better on the team. I think all around. I think he's younger. He's still in his prime. He's working for that $40 million a year contract if he doesn't get it now. I'd put, and maybe that's my problem putting Breeze in elite because I think Prescott's elite, just purely for fantasy standpoint. How can you be in the MVP race and not be an elite fantasy quarterback? I think it'd be hard to show that.
So do you want to revisit that now or get through it and then we'll check it out at the end? Because I actually do probably agree with you that I would put maybe Dak above Breeze, but maybe I wouldn't put Breeze in that elite tier. How about we get through it and then see where he falls at the end? Are you cool
Let's get through that. But you put Prescott over Allen, so we could even do that for the list we currently have. I think we already got Brady. We could just kind of do them the way we feel, kind of tier them from their own tier now. So if you want to talk about that average, I think there's some questions there. I'd probably go Cousins, Burrow, Bridgewater, and I like Cousins, Burrow. I question. I might even take the upside of a player like Burrow. I'm not sure how you feel about that, but
we'll get there. We'll cross the road when we get there. All right, let's get some more people in here, and then we'll figure that out. Next up, you have Andy Dalton, Mike. So Dak's back up. Where would you put him?
Oh, no doubt. Please drop. The Cowboys shouldn't drop him. I think that's a great backup quarterback. If you have a backup quarterback as your backup quarterback, you a bum. You did something wrong. You need to reevaluate. You need to hit the waiver wire real quick. You better be trying to make trades. You better be trying to bum off someone because it just ain't going to work.
No, I agree. And speaking of something I don't think is going to work, with Sam Darnold, even though I love the talent, I love his individual talent, but I hate the team that he's on. I'm going to put him below Teddy Bridgewater in average. I don't know who he's throwing to. I don't know who's protecting him. Obviously, we got my man Mekhi Becton, who he can drive guys off the ball with no problem. Maybe that'll open up some running lanes for Le'Veon Bell. But again, I think that losing a guy like Robbie Anderson, I think that's going to be huge. I don't really – obviously, you get Chris Herndon back after some injuries last season, but I just don't see it with Darnold. I think I would take all those QBs in average before I took Darnold, even though the upside with him might be there if it is a dynasty situation. Until I see the Jets put something together for 2020, I'm going to put him at the bottom of that tier.
What is your problem saying people's names? It's Robbie Anderson, Kevin Byard, and we got Robbie Anderson. You need to stop this. You need to stop this now. don't even comment, guys. I got you. I don't get it. But
It's not Roby
to be
Anderson.
honest, to be honest, I might be putting him in the please drop. I think you lose Roby Anderson.
It's not Roby Anderson. What are you
Yes,
talking
it
about?
is. Yes, no, who cares? I'm right. But you lose a wide receiver like that, and you're placed with Denzel Mims. And yes, you do get a left tackle. He's still on the bottom tier of starters. I'm thinking he's somewhere between 28 and 32. And for me, that's a please drop. That ain't an average. I don't have him average. I'd have maybe top 20. Top 20 average. Rest of them, they shouldn't be on your team. Maybe we'll say 22, 23. He is probably a bottom 5 quarterback for me, and not because of the talent, just because of the situation he's in. The Jets are a mess, an MESS mess, and I just trust me. I'd like to put him in that average, but he's just not for me.
Well, speaking of guys who might be for you, what are your thoughts on my man Ryan Fitzpatrick, Mike? Where do you fall on him?
You know, the average, fantasy football, league probably 10 to 12. So you got your 12 starters, your 12 backup, and Ryan Fitzpatrick is one. You a bum too. Please drop that man. Please drop him.
Can I say something though? If he does play over Tua, I think that he's a perfect waiver wire pickup on a week to week deal because you know how much he just loves to throw the ball deep. He'll maximize a guy like Devontae Parker. We saw it last year. He'll use Mike Gesicki. He'll use those offensive weapons. He'll use the improved offensive line, even though it's probably not where it needs to be yet. I think that he's an interesting, kind of replacement quarterback for matchup purposes. Does that make sense? So that's why I definitely wouldn't put him behind guys who won't be playing football because as long as he is playing above Tua, which I assume he will, but if he does, I would maybe debate him at the end of average. But until we know, who's going to be that starter week one, I think please drop's a good spot. Yeah.
Yeah, Fitzmagic obviously can have that 1 week wonder, even a couple week wonder. But I'm not just putting because the man's actually playing that he's an average. I think even if he is playing, he might have those weeks where he shines. But like when all's said and done, even if he plays the whole season, he's a bottom echelon quarterback. In my opinion.
For fantasy though, he's not bad. Last year he was QB 16. That was above Derek Carr, above Kirk Cousins. I think we got to remember that. If he is playing, to me, I would say maybe bottom end of average. But because we don't know, and if you're drafting tomorrow, I would not pick him. But as a waiver wire QB2, assuming you have a lot of other talent on your roster, I wouldn't hate it. I really wouldn't.
Fair enough. We'll put him at the lower end of please drop again. We'll relook at this when this is all said and done. But you up next. I think I know where this guy's going. We got big old Joe Flacco.
Well, if Sam Darnold was at the end of average, you best believe that his backup is going to be at the end of please drop. It doesn't get more drop than Joe Flacco. I'm not going to lie. I don't have much else to say other than I hope for Sam's sake we don't see Joe Flacco play, but for Joe's sake, I hope he doesn't either because that offensive line is just terrible. So that being said, Mike, you got Nick Foles. Where are you putting him?
Maybe I'm being too mean. But I think when you have, two quarterbacks, that means you don't have any quarterbacks. And that looks like it's the situation for the Bears. If you guys watch the team recap video, I'm not a huge fan of the Bears team. The defense has some talent, but that offense is garbage. It's a trash can. Again, as I've said in previous videos, you're better off just playing actual trash cans, like you do in drills at practice. You might have more luck, in all honesty. So he's on a please drop. He's probably on the higher end of please drop in case he does win out against Mitch Trubisky. People are thinking that's going to be the case. I don't know why. I think it's really a 50-50 race at this point. I think it's really what they show. If we have a camp preseason, who knows what this season's going to look like. But, yeah, he's please drop.
No, I completely agree, honestly. I don't even know where the 50-50 comes in personally. I think it's more 60-40 Mitch, 70-30 Mitch. To me, if you invest so much capital in a guy, then you want to at least see him through his contract, especially at that QB position. Don't just give in because the fans are pressuring you or something like that. To me, Mitch needs to be the starter there. you're probably not going to compete this year anyway. If Nick Foles plays, even if he's Super Bowl Foles, you're still not probably going to compete. So why not give Mitch that last chance to prove himself before, we assume you kind of kick him out the door, I guess. But with that being said, guys who maybe I wouldn't kick out the door, but would be just higher than that, I'm going to put Jared Goff at the top end of average. I know, losing Todd Gurley, I think a lot of people might say, oh, that's going to help him out. I don't think it will because, Todd Gurley, when he was healthy, this man would see eight men in the box pretty frequently. Now you're going to take that away. You're going to take Brandon Cooks away. The offensive line is shoddy. Whitworth's a year older. To me, like he has some upside to where he could throw for some 300-plus yard weeks. But man, he's really no higher to me than just an average QB2 at this point.
No, I'm totally with you there. Yeah, I don't think there's a whole lot to say about the Rams and Jared Goff. I think it's sad because just a couple years ago they were Super Bowl contenders, and now they're a mad team. They're an average. They're a just stop team. So, and that's where Jared Goff is. So we could get to this next one. This one's interesting. Dwayne Haskins.
For fantasy, Mike.
For fantasy, yeah, please drop. The Redskins are a mess. We're not even sure if he's going to play for the Redskins. Who knows what that team's name is actually going to be? That whole team, that organization, it starts from the owner down, a mess. It's a mess. Obviously, that defensive line looks good, but that ain't going to help Dwayne Haskins at all. Hopefully, Scary Terry on the NFL side makes some improvements. I think he will. He might have a couple good weeks, but they didn't really address the number 2 wide receiver position unless I'm missing a player. The running game, hopefully Geis can make it through this year and kind of help out Dwayne Haskins, take the load off his shoulders. But I don't see a whole lot here. It's a please drop.
I think Haskins is really interesting because, again, for fantasy only, I think that playing from behind, you're going to have the chance to amass a bunch of fantasy points, obviously. And, you said they didn't address wide receiver 2. Maybe they didn't address it necessarily well, but they did get Antonio Gandy-Golden. They got Antonio Gibson, who we don't really know is he going to be a running back wide receiver. So, obviously, you lose a guy like Trent Williams, so I guess, you can't lose him if he doesn't play. But I think that he's an interesting player that, again, he could be in that average tier just because of the game script, because you expect them to be throwing the ball 35, 40, 45 times a game in some instances, trying to come back and win. But no, I think I do agree with you. I would say right now you would put him as, just the top tier of that probably waiver wire guy.
No, I'm with you there. And I think this next one's interesting. It's kind of weird. We don't see Tyrod Taylor, which I think actually should be on this list. With some of the backup bums that we have on this list already. But let's go into Justin Herbert.
Well, you want to talk about mispronouncing names. It's Tyrod Taylor. Please apologize to Tyrod when he watches.
I apologize.
No, I'm going to put Justin Herbert. I'm going to put him actually behind Ryan Fitzpatrick and Dwayne Haskins. I would put Tyrod Taylor even lower, but I think Herbert, if he does play, he's right there where, again, he does have some athletic upside for fantasy purposes a little bit. He has some good weapons. Obviously, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Mike Williams, Austin Eckler out the backfield. It's not terrible. But, the offensive line still, I know they added Trey Turner, Brian Bulaga. Not bad, but to me, again, we have to see you do something before I can really put you up in those tiers. So maybe for a dynasty league, maybe not even this year. Maybe like if you're drafting him next year for a dynasty league, I would get it, as a QB for the future. But right now for the 2020 season, I would say he's a waiver wire guy at best. So, Mike, speaking of waiver wire guys, where do you have my man Taysom Hill?
We should have below please drop.
You want to just keep him down low? Like we could just keep him down here. All right.
He belongs in the please drop. If we put bums like Joe Flacco up there, we got to put Taysom Hill up there. I don't get it. I guess maybe I don't remember last year's stats, but was he even in the top 32 with – obviously they use him as like that Swiss Army knife kind of player, but I don't think it's enough to actually President starting him at quarterback. If he gets 30 rushing yards and a touchdown, is that going to make up for, 200 yards and a touchdown? No. Stop it.
I mean, in the event that Drew Brees gets hurt and then Jameis Winston gets hurt, I think that you could say that maybe he's a guy you'd consider off the waiver wire. But we didn't make these lists. We found it on the website. So I don't know who made this list. Shout out to you for reducing my workload. But man, why is Taysom Hill in this group? And that's really all I have to say. Next up, I guess I'll take my man Lamar Jackson. Even though people probably aren't going to like where I have him in the NFL top 100, I'm putting him at the top of elite. I think that what we saw him do last year. Obviously, there are going to be some more questions on that offense. So losing Marshall Yanda, you really didn't address that wide receiver 2 spot. I think that there's going to be some more questions, but in terms of just fantasy purposes, when we're talking about running upside, when we're talking about a guy who his touchdown rate was through the roof last year, I'd never seen players get like 4 passing touchdowns on like 17 attempts. But that seemed to be Lamar's game logs kind of week in and week out. So that's why I have him at the top tier of elite. Do you disagree with that or no?
No, it's hard you can't really disagree. There ain't much to disagree about.
I guess there is a lot to disagree about though. In Jimmy Garoppolo, Mike, I feel like on Twitter the other day, 49ers fan was telling me that he was a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, which I thought was really funny. So do you have him as a top 10 quarterback in fantasy even?
No. He just lost his wide receiver number 1, who was a questionable wide receiver number 1 at that. No. He's mid-tier average, and that might be even pushing it just because of the team. I think that defense can help the offense out a lot. I think they could really limit the other team's offense on the field and give Jimmy Garoppolo the limited amount of opportunity to kind of be somewhat serviceable. I don't like he's not even a matchup guy. Like if like a matchup comes up that works for the 49ers offense, I'd take one of their running backs. Like it's not like I take Jimmy G as the guy that's going to really break out for that team. So he might be. No, I think that's right where he belongs. Average. I don't think he's with some of those please drop bums that we have down there. But he's not good.
Well, and plus, I've kept alluding to it, but like the game script is just not going to follow, or it's not going to help him at all. This is a team where they get ahead by running the ball, and once you're ahead, you run the ball more often. I don't think there's many games where Jimmy G is going to throw for 300 yards. I don't think there's going to be many games where he has to. I might actually put him below Teddy Bridgewater on this list if I was being completely honest, just based off the sheer weapons and need for passing that they have. Where do you fall on that?
I take Teddy over Jimmy as well. I think Teddy has a better chance to throw some dimes. And speaking of some dimes, we got Danny Dimes.
I don't even want to do this one, Mike, because I feel like people are just going to say I'm hating. But, like, Danny Dimes, I'm going to have him – I'll put him just above Sam Darnold. I'll put him above Jimmy G too, actually, because, again, game script, that's going to be a team that needs to pass. Problem is, who is he passing to? You can only throw so many screens and flares to Saquon Barkley. And yeah, I don't know. I don't really know what you're doing on that offense. Golden Tate still might be your best receiver. I don't know how you didn't fix that this offseason. But, I mean, do you agree with that, or would you have him higher or lower? Where are you falling on Mr. Daniel Jones?
I feel like we're agreeing on this list pretty well. I think, obviously, the only question I have is the Dak Prescott. I think Danny Dimes right where you have him is perfect.
Speaking of guys that we're going to disagree on, Mike, I already know this one. I already know. Kyler Murray, Mike, where do you want him?
Oh, I think you know where I want him. Oh, you're going to disagree. You get a wide receiver 1 like DeAndre Hopkins on top of Larry Fitz. I don't know how that man's still playing. Larry legend. Like, he literally is a legend. Still playing and producing. You got – 2 up, bud.
Whoa, you want him in elite?
Oh, yes. I think he's an elite option. I think in fantasy. I think he's an elite option in fantasy. He's only going to get better. The game's going to slow down for him. You're going to see more rushing yards from him. I think we're going to see similar to Lamar Jackson. I think he's a better just natural thrower of the ball than Lamar Jackson. Maybe he doesn't have necessarily the damage on the ground, but I think that he's an elite quarterback this year. I think DeAndre Hopkins brings him. I think he'd be on the top echelon of good without DeAndre Hopkins, and that's so. I'm kind of speaking to DeAndre Hopkins' difference on this team. I think so. Maybe look at this last, Mike, before you attack me.
No, you're good.
It's definitely Kyler Murray as the talent and getting better. I think what we saw year 1 was obviously really impressive, but adding a wide receiver 1 like DeAndre Hopkins, that's huge. So this is just as much about DeAndre Hopkins maybe than it is about Kyler Murray.
I would put him right there with Josh Allen, personally. I mean, as we said earlier, Josh Allen was QB6 last year. You had Stephon Diggs. Kyler Murray was QB7 last year at DeAndre Hopkins. I think that, to me, he's in that category. I can't put him in the elite tier personally. That's why I'd have him down a little bit. Again, how many times have we seen people after that first year just overhype guys, cough Baker Mayfield, but like you see them just say they're going to be MVPs, and then all of a sudden they're I don't want to say bona fide scrubs, but they have down seasons, and I just don't think that that's a perfect team. Even though the weapons are there, that offensive line is about as close to a dumpster fire as it gets. And for a guy, I guess for him, it's going to be okay because he can run for his life. But man, for you to say he's elite, like where would you take this guy in a draft? Like what round are we talking in terms of the value? Because maybe I'll agree with you if you're talking you can get him at QB7 or QB6, but if you think he's like QB3 or 4 off the board, I can't get with that, Mike.
Oh, see, so for me, I'm a guy that waits on my quarterbacks, and sometimes I wait maybe like a round too long. Last year, Lamar Jackson was what I was hoping for. I just tried to get him around later, so I didn't end up getting him. So I'm waiting to see this list go on because I'm actually probably taking, all honesty, I'm taking him over right now 4. I actually think I'd take Dak Prescott over him.
I would take Dak as well over him, yes.
So you know what? Here. Put Kyler Murray in good right now. In great.
In great?
Not good.
Right there?
Right there. And let's look at this because I honestly think I take Dak and Kyler over Drew, though.
I'm actually perfectly okay with that. Yeah. Are you fine with that?
In all honesty, we're doing that. Like that elite, I don't see too many elites coming up. Dak Prescott's looking like an elite quarterback.
Man, you just keep on moving the goalpost. Okay. How about we just keep Dak here and then we add some more guys? We only have another row and a half, so let's just get to that. And I don't think we're going to be getting elite with this next selection, Mike. Drew Lock. Obviously, Broncos fans love this man. They love what they saw in the 5 games, 6 games that he played. But I'm just not there. Obviously, it does help to add Jerry Jeudy. It helps to add Melvin Gordon. But man, I'm going to put him at the top end of please drop. And I could see people saying low end of average, but I just can't. I can't do anything with a 5-game sample. I'm sorry. Can't.
For me, this is our biggest disagreement here. I think he's on maybe not biggest. I think he's on the upper side of average.
Why?
I think obviously we need to see improvement.
What have you seen him do?
That weapon core. If he could produce, even build off what he had the last 5 games of last season,
yeah,
he could be good. He's good. He could be a top 15 fantasy football quarterback. He could be right at that 12 mark.
I'll move him up if you want. I'll move him up, but like to me, once we get into average, it's guys that might be on your roster week 1. I don't know if Drew Lock should be. So where do you think he should fall?
Like I think right in front of Teddy. All honesty, I think Teddy's a better quarterback, but Jerry Jeudy's weapons, not Jerry Jeudy.
Drew Lock's, yeah.
I think Drew Lock's weapons.
If you're just doing it off weapons, then yeah, I would put him above Joe Burrow. But like, I just don't think that he's that good at the game of football compared to some of these other guys.
No, I don't think he has the talent of Burrow or Teddy, or even quarterbacks behind him. To be honest with you, but his weapons are there. I think that helps. You talk about how much it's a matter of the player's talent as well as the position they're in, or the team they're on, or the situation. Drew Lock's a kind of the situation. I think he has the talent to be. If he had the talent, he could be in the great situation.
Absolutely.
But he doesn't have the talent.
He doesn't. That's
so he's in the average. I think that's a fair drop. I think putting him in the please drop because he doesn't have a talent. I think maybe you're underselling his talent. Like I guess you're judging him on something he hasn't done yet.
Yeah, I'm not giving him credit for something that he hasn't done yet.
I don't think putting him on average is judging him. I think that's a pretty good tier where like it could go either way. I think you put him in the please drop. I think you're judging him on the wrong side. You're almost kind of negating anything because he's only had a 5-game slate and it wasn't bad. You can't knock him for having a good 5 games.
I think they went 4-1, but the problem is that like I don't think that it was because of anything Drew Lock was doing. I just don't think that he's the right guy in this offense. But yeah, you can say if Jerry Jeudy's going to get 100-yard performances, Cortland Sutton 100-yard performances, you have Noah Fant. I think that if there's a weapons core for him to be in, that's almost a great spot. But the problem is I don't know. I'll settle with him in average, but to me he will not be on my fantasy rosters. Again, in Dynasty, maybe if you're a real big Broncos fan and think that he could blow up, but I'm just not I'm not sold on it just yet. And speaking of guys that I'm not sold on, it's your pick, Mike, but where do you have my man Marcus Mariota?
So I think it's disrespectfully that you're trying to put Marcus Mariota and Drew Lock on the same bracket. Because Marcus Mariota, please drop. There ain't no doubt about it. He ain't even starting on his own team. It's another backup. If you got a backup of a backup, you should be a backup on your own fantasy team. You should literally have someone else pick your team and you just be there just in case something happens. Just in case, oh, man, I have the cold today. I can't look at the team. Can you do it for me? Like, that's what you should be doing if you think Marcus Mariota should be on your team.
I agree with that. I definitely agree with that. I don't think you said anything wrong there. I mean, are they going to run a little bit of read option with him? Maybe. Are you going to get any fantasy points? Really? No. A guy who's going to give you fantasy points, though, my man Patrick Mahomes. He's probably at the top end of great, right, Mike?
Something like that. Something like that.
I think the Chiefs paid him because they think that he's the greatest quarterback of all time. Am I that sold? No. But I'll put him as QB1 for right now, at least. I think he'll probably end up there as well. But, man, you just talk about the perfect situation of weapons. Now you add Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Just a great spot for any quarterback, let alone somebody of Mahomes' talent. So, obviously, no disagreements there. I think we might have some with the next pick, Mike, Baker Mayfield.
I'm going to touch on Mahomes real quick. I can guarantee you one thing about your fantasy draft. Pat Mahomes and or Lamar Jackson will be overdrafted. I think both those quarterbacks might be gone by round 2, early round 3. And I think that's way too early to take quarterback. Obviously, they're elite talents, as we already have them on elite. If you could swing that man, either of them round 4, I think that's right where they should be. And I hate taking a quarterback that early, but maybe they can get – with Lamar Jackson, you're getting a running back / below average quarterback. That's basically what you're getting with Lamar Jackson, but that's top tier in fantasy. Pat Mahomes is just an elite quarterback all around. Too early. Don't be that second round quarterback taker. Because, man, I guarantee you're going to see it in leagues this year, and it's going to be a sad sight to see.
No, that's the thing. Don't think that just because we have him as elite excuses a second or first round pick. Not even close. Because I would rather have some of these good or great guys. I'd rather have them in round 7, 8, 9 than Mahomes in 1 or 2, just based on a value perspective.
No, I'm straight with you. But we get into the next guy, Baker Mayfield. We're going to disagree here. I think you said what you said. I think he right now, top end of good. I think getting yourself a pair of book tackles, that's huge. That's going to pay so much dividends for this Cleveland offense. I think getting Jack Conklin and Jedrick Wills, I think that's huge. Oh, my God. This man has some time in the pocket to – finally see the field. He's not going to have to worry about a DN on his back before the ball's even snapped. Like, that is going to pay dividends, and he'll finally be able to produce on those weapons, those elite weapons that the Browns already have.
Can I be completely honest? If this was just straight up my own list where I was projecting for the future, this upcoming season, 2020 fantasy points, I would have Baker Mayfield right there. I think that adding those 2 tackles, you're going to see the difference that makes. You're going to see the difference that adding Austin Hooper makes. You're going to see this entire offense unlocked. But I guess I do see what you're saying in the fact that we haven't really seen it yet to this point, but we are definitely putting him higher than most people would, I would say. To me, I wouldn't be shocked if he's able to bring this Browns team to a playoff berth and really be kind of a dark horse MVP candidate. That's why I would have him that high. But again, I just think he'll be a steal in fantasy drafts where you could get him post round 10, honestly, especially considering at what is that? At the worst there right now, he's QB7, So I think I'm just higher on him than probably everybody else right now, except some Cleveland homers. But even them, they might be lower based off what they saw last season. I just think that, the improvements around him, that's going to make him such a good player.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. I think for me, man, I'm like looking at Josh Allen, then Baker on those 2 tiers. I don't know if it makes me question that I want to put Baker to the great or Josh Allen to the good. I think they are really close. Just that rushing attack that Josh Allen also brings, is it enough for fantasy? Because obviously talent-wise and position-wise, just for the whole team, I like Baker. But Josh Allen just has that potential to run the ball 10, 12 yards down the field, and that's a 1.2 points. And it's quick and easy. If you want to talk about quick and easy, you can put this next bum right in the please drop section.
I don't even know where he belongs to go in this section. I don't think it matters because neither of us are fans of Gardner Minshew. Do I need to say more? Obviously, he had a nice little connection with DJ Chark there late last season, but this team as a whole is just bad. The offensive line's not great. Obviously, as you saw in my top 100 video, I think Leonard Fournette is an elite back, but the problem is he's in just such a bad spot, and Gardner Minshew is a part of that bad spot. Maybe if you got him some weapons, got him, if you put him in Denver, I think that now we're having a little bit of a discussion. Can he move up a tier? I would say that those are two comparable guys to me, honestly, and maybe people disagree with me there, but again, just the fact that he's not in a situation like Denver, he's in Jacksonville, please drop for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. It went from Minshew magic to Minshew tragic. But speaking of some magic that's going to be happening, let's talk about this next quarterback. I'm glad you got him. Where you putting Cam Newton?
Dude, people are going to hate it. People are going to hate it because they're going to say – I've seen so many people say, he hasn't had a good season in 5 years. He's a bum. They're still going to start Stidham. Well, maybe they'll start Stidham if they think he's great because I think Cam Newton's really freaking good, man. I'm not going to lie. I think that Cam – the worry with him is if he can stay healthy. And, honestly, in fantasy purposes where you have a backup quarterback, unlike NFL teams where most don't, you have a backup QB. I have no problem getting him probably, post round 12. I actually love it because, as we said, he's going to have the best offensive line of his life. He's going to have one of the best weapons cores of his life. He's going to have the best head coach of his life. And, it's just all these best. Eventually, you think, are we going to see Cam Newton's best? Well, maybe pump the brakes there. But if we even see 60, 70, 80% of Cam Newton, I think you're getting a great fantasy score, even maybe without the high running upside that we saw a couple years ago. That's why I have him in kind of the high end of good at this point.
I'm totally with you there. Man. Last couple years, I've been banking on Cam, to be honest. He's been my quarterback number one. I've been drafting him, and he's kind of let me down recently. But I think this year he comes through. I hate to be that guy. But I'm going to keep doing it until it works out or he, eventually he's out of the league. I'm going to keep doing it. But I think we both agree there. People might disagree there, but we're on the same page. But maybe we're not on the same page. I think this is an interesting one, this next upcoming one. Phillip Rivers with the Colts.
Yep.
They got Pittman. They got T.Y.
That running back core, Jonathan Taylor, added to Marlon Mack, Naheem Hines, Jordan Wilkins.
This is where I'm going to go with him. I think he's on the low end. Is that really where you put? Is that where you'd put him?
No, where would you put him?
Low end of good. I think the Colts want to run first, pass second. I think he has the weapons. He has the offensive line. He's in a really good spot for him. But there's definitely regression. There ain't no doubt about it. But with that team, can that team elevate him to just at least be a good quarterback with regression? But he also regression from what? From being a Pro Bowl talent quarterback. So I think some weeks he's gonna ball. Some weeks you might think, why is this man still in the NFL? But I think with that team, I think he's in the good. I think he's on the really low end. But there's so much talent on that offense, and obviously he has the experience. I think he can still make a difference.
I think that good suggests that I'm looking to maybe draft him at some point, which I don't think I necessarily am. But I do agree with a lot of what you said. It is the best offensive line he's ever played with. You can debate the weapons if they're better or worse. I would say maybe slightly worse, but again, now he's going to be in a dome, for example. That might help him out a little bit. I don't mind it. He's in a weaker division than he was certainly last year. He's going to get to see Jacksonville twice. That's a plus, and that's a plus for anybody. I'll settle with him here, but I do think that I would probably take these two, Goff and Cousins, over Phillip. But I see what you're saying. We'll discuss that at the very end. One thing I don't think we have to discuss, though, is my man Josh Rosen. I love you, Josh. I'm not going to lie. I wish that you got a better shot somewhere, but it's not going to be on my fantasy team. You're at the bottom of please drop, buddy. I hope you get to show your skills somewhere, somehow, but I don't think it's going to be in Miami. It's definitely not going to be for Team Preville. Do we need to say anything other than that, Mike?
No, not at all. I think that was great. Oh, I appreciate the laugh. I think this next one's interesting. We got Stash Man himself, Aaron Rodgers.
Discount double check.
Discount double check. The only way I'm drafting this man is if I get him at a discount because, man, that Green Bay Packers offense, it was right. It was a little bit of a mess last year. Defense was elite. You thought with a couple weapons, especially in this upcoming class, they can make the difference. They can make those picks to bring that offense right over for a Super Bowl run. And what do? Draft Aaron Rodgers' replacement. That's what they did. Yes, they did. Unless Aaron Rodgers is going to find a way to throw to Jordan Love, I don't see this really working out for him. I could honestly see a year that Baker Mayfield outperforms Aaron Rodgers. But just off talent,
that sounds so blasphemous. But from a fantasy perspective, is it really that crazy?
No.
I don't think so. I do agree that if we were talking talent, yeah, I would still have Aaron Rodgers, great elite. But I do actually agree with you. Are you saying that he belongs right in here?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Because I actually completely agree. If you had a better wide receiver too than Devin Funchess, maybe I'd be on board here. If you had a better tight end than Jay Sternberger, maybe I'd be on board. If you had a better right tackle than Ricky Wagner, as a Lions fan, I apologize, Aaron. They're not doing you any favors, my man. So maybe people say, okay, now Jordan Love, he's going to come out super motivated. I think he'd come out more motivated if you gave him some actual weapons to work with. So from a fantasy perspective, I'd have him right around here. He was QB 10 last year in terms of scoring. I think that that's going to fall kind of right in line with where we have him ultimately.
Yeah, speaking of where we have him fallen, I think we're going to disagree on this next player. I honestly do.
Do you really?
Yeah, but it's all you, man. Big Ben.
I'm a big Ben fan, actually. I like the addition of Chase Claypool. I like that all the weapons are healthy. I still like the offensive line. If you have Philip Rivers in good, I'm certainly going to have Big Ben in good. I think I'd put Big Ben right there, actually, just above Derek Carr.
There was zero disagreement. Okay, that's literally I in that spot. I thought you were going to put him on the upper echelon of good to even great, but we're being really picky with that great and elite, and I like it because I think it takes a lot to be in that great and elite position, like it should be, where everyone should be. If you average or below average, you belong in the please drop. That's because you're bum.
Exactly. All right, so speaking of guys who I guess aren't bums, we got a couple interesting ones in a row here, Mike. Where are you going with old Matty Ice, Matt Ryan?
I think he's good. I think he's an upper echelon quarterback too. I think I'm putting him right where you put.
I want to know where you're. I'm not. I'm just moving the cursor, baby. I don't know
right where there to one behind Ben.
Really, potentially right there,
or right in front. I'd probably put him before Ben, but
I'll be honest. If it's me, I actually think that one guy who's going to really help this Atlanta offense, and I know people don't love it. I think that the addition of Todd Gurley is really gonna help this team and potentially open up stuff downfield more so for Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. To me, even though losing Austin Hooper certainly does hurt, obviously your replacement of Hayden Hurst, I would maybe put Matt Ryan one or two spots higher. But I'm cool with this spot because, again, there's a chance that Todd Gurley doesn't even play considering all the problems with his knees. So I have no problem with him right there.
Okay, it sounds like we're pretty close. We've been really close on a lot of these. I thought we were going to get more disagreements, and really not so much. But this next player, we might actually – I already said it, but we might have another disagreement. Where are you having Matt Stafford?
Well, obviously, as a Detroit Lions fan, I think that there's no question he's better than Pat Mahomes. I don't know what people are talking about. If this man's worth $503 million, this man's worth $504. No, but in all seriousness, I would say that with the addition of DeAndre Swift, with Big V, which might have been a big mistake at right tackle, I'm going to put him right below Big Ben. But I could see him going higher. I could see him going lower too. Last year he was on the way to a career season, and then he hurts his back, and then he's essentially out for the year. So if he is able to stay healthy, potentially a little bit higher. If he is out, obviously we're talking David Blau and Chase Daniels. So I think that this is where I would put him. But where are you at, Mike?
I'm that little bit higher, but I think that's totally fine. I totally understand. I think this whole group right here is really close. I think that good past Rodgers, I think is really close. I think that's a big bunch of five of them. You really could draft any of those five first, I'd understand it. I think Rodgers and Baker. I think the upside, obviously, just Rodgers with talent, just by himself, and maybe having that extra motivation from the draft pick of Jordan Love, and then Baker just with those tackles. I think the upside is there with those two. I think that next five, I think not necessarily that you know what you're getting, but you're getting a really solid quarterback in fantasy. He might not blow off the socks. He's not going to be that, top tier quarterback, going to be the reason you win that week, maybe, um, or your league. But man, he could be a really foundational like quarterback if you choose to go, higher echelon with your weapons, which you probably should. That's how fantasy works. That's the winners win like that. So
Well,
I'm right with you there.
and that's the value in these guys, and is that you're going to have a better running back core, a better wide receiver core. Potentially, you can stretch on a tight end, and then you're going to have one of these very solid quarterbacks here, where you don't even have to set the market and go out and get one of these guys. You can let somebody reach for Tom Brady first. You can let some New England fan take Cam Newton first, and then you can slip in there with a Matt Ryan or a Matt Stafford or a Big Ben, and really just make out with a QB, kind of low end QB1 in my eyes at especially in larger drafts and larger leagues, I should say, you can get a low end QB1 very late in the draft, and that's why I'm a big fan of that group there. And honestly, that's usually where I sit with my starting fantasy QBs. But where I don't sit, Mike, is with the next guy. So it's your turn though. So where do you put Ryan Tannehill?
I think the way we have this list working out, he's average. I think I'd probably put him right below Teddy.
That's exactly where I had him lined up and ready to go. I think that last year, the problem is there's still legitimate questions. Was last year just an anomaly? There's sometimes me and Mike, we have a saying that, that's what happens when you get paid, because your play sometimes starts to dip. And was Tannehill an example of a guy who, he was a flash in the pan, and then now when you get paid, his play is going to drop back down. I think that, some of the stuff we saw A.J. Brown do last season, that was a little bit just freakish to me. I believe he led the league in 50-plus yard receptions, just splash plays to the highest of levels. And, I don't think you're going to be able to rely on Derrick Henry as much as you were last season. I don't think that you did enough to bolster that offense, losing Jack Conklin. I think that that's a good spot for him.
Speaking of a good spot, I think we know exactly where Money Mitch is going.
A lot of people might say that he should be at the end of Please Drop, but I'll put him at the mid to front of Please Drop.
You should put him right next to Nick Foles.
See, I think he's better than Nick Foles. I really do, and I think he's better than Gardner and Herbert as well, considering we don't even know if Herbert's going to play, and we know what Gardner's going to get us, in my opinion. I think that Mitch is right there because, again, no fault of his own necessarily. Well, a little bit of his own fault, but that Bears team is just so bad. That front office has done such a bad job of building a coherent team around him. You just have nobody who can get separation. You have nobody who can block for him. You have not a very good rushing attack. No offense to Dave Montgomery and Tariq Cohen. I just don't know who's moving the needle in Chicago, and it's definitely not Mitch. So that's why he's here in Please Drop. But Mike, next up, a guy who is potentially going to move the needle in Miami, maybe not this season. Where are you putting Tua?
Yeah, we should have a who knows section because really, who knows? Obviously, just to start off with your draft, are you going to draft Tua? No. If you really, really, really just wanted to take like a last pick waiver on him, the last round, just in case he does start and somehow make a run, even if he does make a difference this season, it's going to be at least a quarter or halfway in the season. Are you going to draft that? No. Not for a quarterback that the upside probably isn't really there. He's in the Please Drop.
The only reason to me that you would take Tua is so you can name your team going to the playoffs. That's all. That's the only reason you would take him at any point in a fantasy draft. I don't know what else to say about it. I do know what to say about the next man, and I was getting a lot of hate for having him number 80 on my top 100 list. People didn't love it. I don't think they realized that was QB7. It wasn't very disrespectful. But I think for fantasy purposes, where we're talking four points per passing touchdown, I'm going to put him. Ooh, this is real tough actually. I'm going to put him just under Kyler Murray. Just under Kyler Murray. I think that you have I don't want to say a solid wide receiver core, because obviously losing DeAndre Hopkins is a blow if I've ever seen one, right? But you have Brandon Cooks, you have Randall Cobb, you have Will Fuller, you have Kenny Stills. Those are four decent weapons, right? All wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 weapons. You have David Johnson still, who maybe he'll be proving us wrong next season. I'm not really sure. I think on the running upside alone, he's in this great tier, but I cannot put him above Dak for sure. I could argue him above Kyler, who I do think is still a little bit high, but right in that range. I think a lot of people are going to put him here at quarterback 3, but I'm not there, especially with some of these next 2 that we have coming up, or even next 3.
Yeah, I think we might disagree on this next one, and I got him. Maybe not disagree. I think. Would you put him elite? Because I'm not putting him elite. He's great.
Yeah, but the question is, where would you put him in great? That's my question. Because
I put him right in front of Watson. Right in front of Watson. I did Kyler Murray. I think for fantasy sake, obviously not as a quarterback, if I'm starting to start my team, again, we said this is fantasy only. I just don't think the weapons are there. I think.
What do you mean? Whoa. Okay, so last year.
Let me talk.
Hold on.
Let me talk. So obviously they got Jalen Reagor. Okay. Alshon Jeffrey's coming back. Deshaun Jackson, I'm not sure. I'm not going to speak on this on a serious note. What he tweeted out and that whole thing. That's a mess. That's a real mess. Is he going to play? I don't even know. So if you're and then what? Miles Sanders. That's what you have. And your offensive line just took a hit. Obviously, you have the offensive line that you had from previously, minus Brandon Brooks. That's a huge loss. That's a huge loss to lose a player like that. That's just the still top end of great. I don't know what the problem with that is, but Kyler Murray just being able to have a rushing attack, having a weapon like DeAndre Hopkins. I think that Wentz doesn't have it. He's a better quarterback with, I think, less talent around him.
So the problem is that last year, to me, not to me, he was QB9 last year in terms of scoring. And, he had no wide receiver with over 500 receiving yards. I think that now, as long as Alshon is able to stay healthy, as long as Reagor is not the next John Ross, I think that you're looking at 2 guys who could be 800 plus, and then Deshaun Jackson, obviously we saw we did week 1 last year against the Redskins, didn't play after that. You still have Zach Ertz, you still have Dallas Goedert, you have Miles Sanders out of the backfield. I'm a huge fan of the Eagles team. And, the question is kind of to the offensive line point. You also lost Jason Peters, which is an interesting loss. Obviously, he was getting older. You lose Brandon Brooks. You lose potentially the biggest loss of anybody, Big V. You're not going to have a swing backup tackle anymore. I guess the Lions will for $10 million. But the thing is, I just think with Wentz, if he's this good with garbage around him in terms of the weapons, obviously the line is getting worse, but the weapons, now I think that he's getting up here, and that's why I would put him above Kyler, maybe above Dak, but I don't really have a problem with where he is there because, again, as you said, Brandon Brooks, that's a big loss. You don't know about Deshaun Jackson. I'd say where you have him is good.
Sweet. I don't think there's any discussion where this next player is going. I think we both.
Well, there is. I think that there is because are you putting him 2 or are you putting him 3?
So you know where I'm putting him.
I do. I think you're putting him 3.
Yeah.
Because the Seahawks are a run-first team, and that's why I'll agree with you, even though if we were talking QB rankings, he would most certainly be one of those 2. But we'll cross that road when we get there on my top 100 list. We don't have to worry about that now. For fantasy purposes, we know how great this man is. This man's an elite QB if we've ever seen one. I'll take him as QB3. And honestly, if you're talking about these 2 going in rounds 1 and 2, I would much rather have Russell in rounds 5 and 6. And I still probably wouldn't take him. I'd probably still go for a Wentz or one of those, low-end QB1s later. But man, just the value, I don't think that the drop-off is nearly as large as people would probably say it is there. And do I have the honors of the last one?
Oh, I do. So Jameis. I think this one's pretty obvious. He ain't the starter. He ain't going to play. You know what that means? Please drop, baby. Let's keep it going. Please drop.
I feel bad for him though. He was QB3 in terms of fantasy points all last year, and now you find yourself on the bottom of please drop. I think that so, Mike, if Drew Brees does get hurt, and we're talking, let's say just a 5-game stretch as we saw with Teddy Bridgewater last year, would you scoop this man up instantly and put him on your team with that weapons core with that offensive line?
Abso-freaking-lutely.
So you think if Jameis Winston does play next year, even if it's just for one game, where would you put him on this in terms of fantasy points? Where would he be?
He's up there. He's up there. I think he's past that tier. I think he's right with, all honesty, Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah. Just from a fantasy perspective, people, if you don't understand that by this point in the video, I don't know what to tell you. But no, this man's a terrible quarterback. But man, when we're talking fantasy points, we're trying to win leagues. That's a guy who could potentially win you a league with an injury to Drew Brees. If you take Drew Brees, honestly, I wouldn't mind taking Jameis Winston just as a handcuff, especially in deeper leagues, because if he does get hurt, this man's going to be the number one waiver selection that next week. So I don't necessarily hate it, especially if you're in a larger 12-man or 14 or even 16-man league. I would definitely consider Jameis, even though if he is just the straight backup, he's a please drop. So, Mike, obviously, we've talked about this throughout the video. Do you have any adjustments to make to this, or are you pretty good with this?
I think one more player needs to be put in elite. I think maybe me and you would question who gets put there. You'd probably put Carson. I'd put Dak. I think there's a fair argument for both. I just say the talent around him, Dak. Carson Wentz is the better quarterback, but I'm talking purely fantasy. I think Dak is the better fantasy quarterback.
So you think that Dak is like he needs to be a tier above these names right here?
I think so.
See, I wish we had like a tier in the middle, like a great and a half, because like I think I would put, well, the thing is that like there is a chance that Ezekiel Elliott technically could just get 300 carries and dominate the ball, right? I don't know if I see it happening. I think that the question is though is does Jerry Jones I don't know if he wants Dak Prescott to have an MVP like season, because then he's gonna have to pay him Patrick Mahomes like money, So do you, if you're Mike McCarthy, do you maybe kind of neutralize and take a step back on the passing game? I think you could, but I'll agree with you that assuming all things considered from last year to this year, if we're just going to see that amount of attempts per game, adding CeeDee Lamb, even though you do lose Travis Frederick and Jason Witten, I know the second one's a big loss. I think that he could definitely be and should be in that elite tier. But other than that, the only one I'd maybe consider moving up. Personally, as I said, I would move Baker up a little bit, but I understand why we have him here. I'd maybe move Phillip down, but I don't hate the list in general. I think this is a really, really solid one overall. Are you in agreement there?
Yeah, and I wouldn't mind. I think Baker, man, if you want to take not even a shot at a dartboard, but no, you can put him up at great. I almost even.
The problem is I would probably put him right here. I really would, and a lot of people
wouldn't go that far.
See, and that's the problem.
I might put him over Josh Allen. Like I can understand that because he is a mobile quarterback. Is he going to get maybe 600 yards? No, but could he get 200, 300 yards? Yeah.
Well, the problem is as well is that in that division, I necessarily don't want him to be playing the Ravens and Steelers defenses twice a year. That's the problem with him being a QB1 straight off the bat. So, I mean, technically, if you do have him here at that good one, you're talking about a guy who in 10-man leagues is the lowest starting QB technically, if you're just looking at it straight like that. But I don't have a problem with him there. But, once we do get into this territory, I can see the hesitation. I will put him there because I do think this is going to be a guy who surprises a lot of people in 2020, assuming we even have a season in 2020. Obviously, the Ivy League, Mike, I assume you heard, they canceled all fall sports. So that's one big domino to fall in terms of college football. So I wonder what's going to happen here in the coming days. Obviously, you guys probably don't want to hear us talk about the coronavirus, so I don't think we'll have a video on that. But if there is anything crazy going on, we'll make sure to talk about it a little bit. But other than that, Mike, do you have anything else, or are we done with this list?
I think we put a great list out there. Like we're putting out great content on YouTube, putting these videos out. Just football, just fun. We're just keeping it fun, keeping it real. Love to have discussion in the comments. So if you have a comment, leave it in the comments. If you liked it, leave a like. Subscribe if you like this video. If you want more videos like this, you want more tiers, we'll go through other positions. I think we probably plan on it. if you like this kind of content, let us know.
But yeah, no, I mean, I think that this video was a lot of fun. It's probably way too long for a lot of you guys. But, if you did watch the whole thing, let us know in the comments. And as Mike said, let us know if you'd want more. I know we would definitely be open to doing more for just fantasy football. And then if you wanted to hear different ones, we would potentially do some more like that. If you just wanted to, have a team one, a head coach one, a specific position one, not in terms of fantasy football, because obviously it does look kind of wacky to have Kyler Murray as QB5. But that's besides the point. If we're talking real life, who is the best QBs? I don't think he would be anywhere near that. No offense, Mike. I can see you squinting off down below me. But no, just let us know if you did enjoy this. I think at the minimum we'll probably do a running back, wide receiver, tight end, and maybe defense one. But if you do want more of these, we can definitely do them. We can rate your team's mascots, stadiums, whatever exactly you want us to talk about. So with that being said, Mike, I think we're out of here, right?
I think we mic'd up. We mic'ing out. Deuces.
Peace, guys.